Empowering, enlightening, and encouraging. Unprecedented times call for unprecedented conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the LaRuelist Café. Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. Hello, hello, hello. I see we have some folks out there waiting today. That's always a good thing when we come on and people are waiting. Because you know what? These folks that you're going to hear from today, they're well worth waiting for. I am Jeannine LaRue of the LaRuelist Café. And tonight we are going to talk about social justice issues. We are going to talk about in these times, no justice, no peace. In these times, no justice, no peace. We got a lot of issues we're going to cover here today. We're going to talk about redistricting and the census, because if you're not counted, we're going to miss out on a whole lot of stuff after this year. So we have a guru who's going to talk about these issues. We're going to talk about the new primary election day. It's not going to be in June, folks. It's going to be in July. And most of us won't be standing in line at a poll. And we do want to make sure if it's vote by mail, our votes are counted. So we'll have someone here today who is going to talk about that. We are going to talk about education, public education, 2020. We still have segregation. Did you folks know this? Did anyone know that in America, many of our schools are still segregated? Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know this. All you have to do is, those of you who are watching us tonight, look at your neighborhoods. Figure it out. Because that's where people are going to school, where they live, what's happening here. We have a professor who's going to tell us all about why and what we can do. She knows about these constitutional issues, and we're going to ask her a few other questions because she also knows that there's a lawsuit that's been filed to make sure that our primary election day is done correctly. So she will be coming on. Then there is going to be a procession tomorrow. It's going to be a processional, like a funeral processional. Yes, because in our New Jersey prisons, over 600 of the correction employees have tested positive for the virus. Over 500 inmates have tested positive with the virus, and almost 50 have died. And we have he's an activist. He is the founder of a major operation called Salvation and Social Justice. But I tell you something that's really close to my heart. He's a preacher man. And not only is he a preacher man, but he's AME. I don't want to, any of the other denominations don't get angry with me tonight, but I was raised AME. My mom was an AME preacher. My dad was AME, so I'm AME. And this gentleman is AME. So we're going to have him look in for a second and talk about it. And then in the midst of planning this program, we had something else occur over this weekend that is absolutely heart-wrenching. The death of George Floyd. Yes, we are going to talk about that. And you know what? Before anybody out there gets all nervous, I am not a cop hater. I want full disclosure. I have, for almost a decade, I have been the communications consultant for the New Jersey Fraternal Order of Police. So I support the police. And when I think something's happening around my house that's not safe, I dial 911 and they show up. They don't know where they're showing up to, but when they get here, they are polite to me. They take care of business. But I am telling you what happened over this weekend. I looked at the TV, I looked at that video 5 times, and I cried, and I had to click off. I couldn't handle it. Yes, we're going to talk about it. We have a retired FBI agent here today, and she has a consulting firm where she actually mentors people who want to be police officers. So she's not here to talk how bad cops are either, but we're going to talk about truth today. We also have, most of you in New Jersey know him, Jiles, who is the president of the New Jersey chapter of Noble, the National Organization of Black Enforcement Officers. So we're going to talk about that today. So before I get too far off on a tangent, because I do it all the time, and we only have an hour, we are going to bring on some of our guests, and we are going to talk about it. So right now, we're going to bring on a woman who's an absolute rock star. I can't believe it, and it will never happen again, that I think I know most people in the state of New Jersey. I don't know why I never met this young woman, but I know her now, and she will find out that she now has a big sister. There'll be days she'll say, I don't know why I can't get rid of this woman, but I'm going to be on her like white on rice. So Elise Boddie, come on in. How you doing, Professor?
I'm doing well, Jeannine. How are you?
I'm fine.
Call me Elise, please.
Call you Elise? Well, I don't know. When I read your bio, that's intimidating. So I'll call you Elise, but there's a whole lot to you that our people really need to know about. She is professor of law at Rutgers University. She appears regularly in the New York Times. She has been on MSNBC. I pulled up some of her speeches on YouTube. The woman is just absolutely brilliant. And she happens to be on the board of the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. Some of you who got the advanced flyer, you will probably wonder, where's Ryan Haygood? Because he was going to be one of our guests tonight. And Ryan is like a son to me. And he did, in fact, he was so upset that he couldn't be here tonight that he didn't even have the courage to tell me. He actually dictated a message in my text so I could hear his voice. So he really, but there was a murder on his street. There is a rally tonight. He is hosting that rally. The mayor is there, Mayor Baraka, so he could not be with us. But Elise, welcome to LaRuelist Café.
Thank you so much. The honor is mine. The honor and privilege is mine. I'm delighted to be here.
Okay, thanks. And we're going to bring you back to cover your topic. But before we do that, we want to just let people see the rest of our guests, their faces. The next individual used to be the public advocate. He and I have walked the roads together for a long time. We actually shared a boss at one time. Well, we shared two bosses because he worked for John Corzine when he was the public advocate. And then when he has been at Rutgers for a long time, professor, he's the former dean of the law school. So I was at Rutgers and I retired from Rutgers. Chen, thank you so much for coming on LaRuelist Café this evening.
Jeannine, it's always great to be with you.
Thank you so much. And you're going to talk with us about the voting issues a little later, and redistricting and census. And we want to hear part of your journey, how you got to where you are. But thank you. We do appreciate your coming on the show tonight.
Please.
And now the next person, I don't know if I could say he's like a younger brother to me. He's something to me. Has he come to the studio yet? All right, we're gonna do the AME. All right. Well, oh yeah, there he is. Okay. I don't know whether you're a younger brother to me or what. I'm not gonna ask your age. I know you're not 70 or anywhere near it.
We're definitely brothers and sisters.
What was that?
We're definitely brothers and sisters.
Okay, so he's telling me that I'm old, and I will accept that. He's saying he's nowhere near my age, but it doesn't matter whether you're my age or not. You know, everybody knows I'm in love with you, so that's a good thing. Jiles Ship has, whenever we want to talk about police issues, and he is are you still a policeman? Do we still call you a policeman?
Well, currently now I'm a commissioner on the New Jersey Police Training Commission.
Okay.
So I'm serving in the law enforcement realm, but I'm not an active duty officer.
Okay. Well, when I got to be pretty close to Jiles, he had invited me in to be one of the keynote speakers at Rutgers. It was for a big conference of Noble. And I walked in there. I've never seen so many people sitting in a room with guns strapped to their waist. It was kind of intimidating, but I think I did okay. They gave me a standing ovation. That was a lot of years ago. So Jiles is coming on tonight. And I thank him, and the next guest we're going to acknowledge. Jiles is coming on tonight to really give his perspective on what is happening with this young man who was killed this weekend and some of the questions that could come up. And I believe, Jiles, if I'm not mistaken, you were also involved in Ferguson, right?
Yes, I was. Sit down.
Okay, so we're going to talk about your activity in Ferguson, but a lot was going on there. So thank you for coming on here, Jiles. And we have two more guests that we're going to acknowledge, and then we're going to go back to, I guess I have to call her Elise. I can't call her Professor Boddie. So the next person, another top cop, but more than top cop, the FBI. This young woman is retired from the FBI agent. She looks great for her age because you can never believe that she is old enough to have retired. I think you did 30 years with the FBI, didn't you?
34.
34. Okay, so that's amazing, amazing. And I again, Rhonda, Rhonda Glover. I'm so happy that you could come on here tonight. At the very last minute, we asked you because my viewers have been texting me and they said, are you going to talk anything about what happened with this police officer, with this young man and the 4 police officers? And who better to come on and share some insight of what some of the questions could be that could come up and what are the messages for us? So we'll have that conversation when we bring you back on. Thank you for coming, Rhonda.
Oh, it's an honor to be back on your show.
Oh yeah, we had fun the last time you were here with the girls. We had the girl talk the last time.
Yes, absolutely, and it's great to be on with Giles Ship.
Right?
Seen him in a minute. Yeah. So it's
okay. See, and that's what else happens on this show. People come on the show and they get to see people they haven't seen for a minute. So I love that as well. Thank you so much. All right, and so last, and as they say in the church, not least, is the man who prays for us, keeps us honest. He has no problem speaking truth to power. And he is the preacher man, but he also is the person who makes sure that the rights that our forefathers fought so hard for, that people stay in the straight and the narrow. Reverend Charles Bullard. Tell me.
It's a blessing to be with you, Jeannine. Thank you so much for having me.
So you're AME pastor. You also have a nonprofit organization. I get your emails all the time. And you have a heavy heart because we have a whole population out there where somebody's got to pay more attention to. And you're coming on here tonight to let us know that we need to pay attention to it, but also what we should expect tomorrow. So we're going to bring you back on, Reverend Boyer, but thank you so very much for agreeing to come on. And I have to say, you know, I know she's watching right now, Leslie Devereaux, but I have to say to Leslie that the pastor saw you on the show a couple weeks ago, and he said, you got my friends on. And he was on LinkedIn. And I said, okay, well, when are you coming on? So we appreciate that you did. Yes, I will come on the show. And I can't wait to hear what you're going to say.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Elise, let's bring on the professor, who we're not allowed to say Professor Boddie, but we're going to say Elise. Elise, tell us about your journey.
Oh, my goodness. So my journey to the issue of school segregation, maybe
Yes.
I'll focus on that. So, you know, I could start in a couple of different places. So I'm not going to give you the 10-minute version. I'll just give you the quick version. Is my journey technically started when I was in kindergarten, but I'm going to fast forward about 35 years or so. I was back in 2004. I was speaking at an event in Wilmington, Delaware, on the 50th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education. And this was when I was litigating civil rights cases at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And I was talking about the promises of Brown and how much progress we made under Brown. and the fact that the country is resegregating because of bad Supreme Court decisions. Any event, long story short, I got off the panel and this gentleman came up to me. And when I was introduced, someone told they shared that I live in New Jersey. And when I got off the panel, a gentleman walked up to me who turned out to be the state president of the New Jersey chapter of the NAACP. And he said to me, so I live in Montclair. He said, I live in Montclair. I don't know who the heck you are. Like, you're up here talking about segregation. We actually have we got a lot of segregation in New Jersey. And I will tell you that in that time, New Jersey was really a bedroom community for me. I was working in New York City and traveling a lot around the country. And I'm embarrassed and ashamed to say that I really had no idea that we had so much segregation, school segregation in New Jersey. And so that was my first, awareness around the issue. And then fast forward a few years later, in fact, about 9 years later, when I came to Rutgers Law School, and through a confluence of different events, met up with a former state Supreme Court justice who approached me about the possibility of suing the state of New Jersey for school segregation. I'd been speaking about the issue, writing about the issue, and I helped to facilitate the litigation that was eventually filed. I'm not actually litigating the case. I want to be really clear in saying that, but I'm involved.
Okay.
So that's my journey.
Well, it's fascinating. Years ago, I used to be an executive at a healthcare system. And one of my colleagues, who is a physician and a doctor and ended up ultimately becoming a commissioner of health, he said to me one day, and I never thought about it quite that way. He said, we were talking about our backgrounds, and he said, my whole education has been segregated. And I said, what are you talking about? I said, you're not that old. He said, no, it was about where I lived. He said, I never really thought about the fact that as a kid, he's Jewish, so he went to a Hebrew school, and then he graduated. He said everybody looked like him. When he went to medical school, everybody looked like him. He said, so when he decided to become a lawyer, he said, I'm going to Rutgers, Newark, because I need a different education. Are you finding that some of this is traced back to our neighborhoods?
Oh, it's all traced back to our neighborhoods. So part of the problem in New Jersey is that we have laws that more or less require students to go to school where they live. And because our neighborhoods are so highly segregated, our schools are very highly segregated. So our borders, our neighborhood boundaries, perform the work of segregation. So it's not like, when we talk about segregation, we're used to thinking about the South. We're not used to thinking about segregation in Northern terms. In the North, it's all about that neighborhood boundary. And what I have said to folks when I talk about this issue, if you drive through New Jersey, the thing about New Jersey is that you can drive for 5 miles and you've crossed through, 4 different towns, in the blink of an eye. And so that the work that those boundaries do in terms of excluding and containing it's harmful to our public school system, and it's harmful to our democracy. When we talk about, you mentioned I can't even wrap my mind around what happened with George Floyd. It's so deeply painful in a very visceral way to me, and just in watching that video. But when you look at and I know we're going to get to that later, and I'm not going to belabor the point, but when you look at that video, when you look at what that officer did to Mr. Floyd, right, the fact that he did not see Mr. Floyd's humanity in that time, the way that he, crushed the life out of him. And the reason why that ties to the issue of school segregation is part of the problem with segregation is that it separates us into sort of we and them. And so in that we don't have an opportunity to go to school together, to learn about one another, to have the sense to have the opportunity to get to know people who are different, who have different experiences, is really critically important in terms of developing a sense of shared humanity and empathy. And obviously, I don't know what that police officer's background is, but the point is that school segregation, it undermines our democracy. It undermines our sense of togetherness and the sense that we're all in this together. So the lawsuit challenges the state law that more or less requires students to go to school where they live. That law is enforced through what I call the residence police, where the folks who go around knocking on doors at the beginning of the school year to make sure that the child lives in that house, that that the address that's on the school form, that they actually live there. And there's something about the fact that we are tied to our zip code, that when folks say, zip code should not be destiny, I agree with that. Zip code should not be destiny. So let's stop using zip code to assign our kids to school.
Well, and the other thing, we see people being very parochial when you talk about segregated schools during the athletic programs. As a former high school teacher, I know that I taught at a school, Pennsgrove High School, and at the time it was half and half, minority and non-minority. Now it's mostly minority. But back then, there were certain other schools, if they played football there, tell the kids to watch out because there could be a problem. There could be a problem. And so we in that whole school system, it seems as though we continue to point out our differences so much that it's really hard when these young people become adults. It's hard for them to think about being cohesive with each other and, the unity that we want people to have.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And one of the reasons why I focus so much on the issue of school segregation, which to many people feels like an old issue, either it's old or it doesn't belong in New Jersey, right? That's the South. But public education, when you think about public education is the front line of social justice and racial justice. Again, because it's the one opportunity that we have as children to learn about people who have different experiences and backgrounds. And that is so critical in terms of how we view people who are different when we become adults. Again, that's shared sense of humanity, that empathy. And you're not going to get those opportunities in the same way where you're dealing with people as peers, throughout the day, throughout the school year, and where you learn those habits of sort of, recognizing the possibilities and potential in every person that you come into contact with. I don't want to sugarcoat it. I don't want to say it's all, wonderful. These are difficult and challenging issues, but if we don't deal with segregation in public education, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to generate that sense of that sense of shared community, that sense of empathy that allows us to see the humanity in people.
So one of the things in dealing with issues coming before us, and I know that there are some religious groups that don't believe in civic engagement, but most people believe in registering to vote and getting involved. You're a part of an institute where they have actually filed a lawsuit to make sure that everybody's vote is counted with our primary election day. And I often tell people, it starts with education, but you're only as free as the people you elect to serve you. It's all reflected on what their views are from the president on down, when they get into office. Tell us generically about that lawsuit.
So this was a lawsuit that was just recently filed by the Campaign for the Campaign Center for Campaign. Oh gosh, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on it. But the League of Women Voters that challenges the ballot certification law under New Jersey state law. As you've mentioned, it's absolutely essential that every vote is counted. That's the way that democracy works. Unfortunately, we have a law that tosses ballots if their signature on the mail-in ballot does not match precisely with the signature that they have on file. And the reason why that's so harmful, as we know, we're shifting, will be virtually entirely vote by mail for our July 7th primary. If we are tossing ballots, that means that we won't have, votes will not be counted. That has a disproportionately harmful impact on voters of color, people with disabilities, English language learners. And so what this lawsuit has asked for is the opportunity to cure. So to the extent that there's a problem with a signature, that voter is notified so that the voter can correct the signature, and that ballot will be counted appropriately.
It's interesting, and in a minute I'm going to bring Dean Chen in, but it's interesting that one of the legislators who made a lot of noise to make sure all votes were counted up in the Patterson area, Assemblyman Wimberly, I read yesterday in an article that he didn't know it, but his vote wasn't counted. And so, I said, I just can't believe this. So now I have to remember, because, I'm creative with my signatures. So I have to remember, did I put the F in for Jeannine LaRue, or did I leave it out? I don't know.
Well, that's a really critically important point, because our signatures evolve over time. The signature that I had when I was 10 is not the same signature that I have now. Of course, I wasn't voting when I was 10 years old, so there's that. Right. But when you're tired, when you're not feeling well, your signature changes, and so we have to make sure that we have a democratic process that is fair, and that where the default is that we're going to count every single vote, and that this chance to give voters the chance to give the voters their ability, the opportunity to cure, will ensure that every vote is fairly counted.
So, Ron Chen, I know you're in the studio somewhere, so we're going to bring you on up. We want you to talk about this whole voting issue, but before you do that, we want to hear about redistricting and census.
Well, Jeannine, as you know, every 10 years, the Constitution requires that a new census be taken. April 1st, which we just passed, was supposedly was Census Day, and probably a lot of New Jerseyans have already filled out their census form. They've done it online, or they got it in the mail and returned it. But it's still there's the great majority of people who are not counted that way, and they tend to be people who are from underserved communities who don't have the same access, who do not have internet access.
And right now, a lot of people
I just went on the website. It took me 10 minutes. Poof, done. But I had that because I have internet access at home. There's a problem now. The COVID-19 pandemic is possibly going to make a real problem, especially in New Jersey. The Census Bureau is asking Congress for permission to delay their official reporting date to July 2021. And New Jersey is one of the few states, New Jersey and Virginia, that have legislative elections that fall. I could count out the days for you, but is it possible to get the official numbers from the Census Bureau that officially constitute the reapportionment commission for the state legislature, have them do their work, come up with the map, hold a primary, and then hold a general election? People have figured it out. It can't happen. It's not going to. The election probably can't happen on time that way. So we've got a looming problem in New Jersey that I hope people pay attention to. And when things like that happen, when votes, the tends to have votes get missed or not counted, it tends to be, again, the underserved communities, whose voters, their votes somehow just don't matter as much because everyone is in such a rush just to get the thing done.
Now tell our viewers, what is the impact of not having the census counted? I mean, what does it affect?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the number of members of Congress, the House that we get. I mean that's important. We lost one seat the last census, because our population is not growing as fast as some other states. It's not
We
impossible.
lost the congressman the last time around.
Yeah, right. And that, and I was the counsel to the chair of the
I know. I served on the Congressional Redistricting Commission. You were a great counsel at that.
Yeah. But that causes a huge hue and cry. But right now, I think where it's probably going to be most contentious is probably drawing the map for the state legislature, which also has to be redone. Assuming, let's hope we don't lose a seat. New Jersey doesn't lose it, but it's not just that. It's federal dollars are allocated according to population, and the Constitution is pretty clear. You count the whole number of persons. It doesn't depend upon their immigration status, the legal status. If they're a person and they're here on April 1st, they should be counted. But we know there's lots of undercounting that goes on. And again, not to sound repetitious, it's usually in the communities. It is in the communities that are underserved, where the Census Bureau is not able to penetrate and count everyone who should be counted.
Right. So we need an action plan.
It's absolutely essential. I don't know if anyone in New Jersey, regardless of their political persuasion, who would think it is a good thing for New Jersey to be undercounted. It just would not make any sense.
Right. So now, what about this whole new primary election day coming up?
Yeah, well, obviously we all saw what happened in Wisconsin, and I think all of us would like to avoid having to tell voters.
That was outrageous. That was outrageous.
At the risk of your physical safety. So Governor Murphy, using emergency powers, and the legislature has delegated to Governor Murphy.
It was smart on his part,
to allow us to vote by mail. Now that's probably going to put some pressures on the system. To put in a little ad, next week, the Eagleton Institute at Rutgers is holding a webinar, and if you go to the Eagleton website, anyone's welcome to listen in. We're going to have the Secretary of State of the state of Washington on, where in Washington they vote only by mail. They don't have live voting anymore, and so she'll tell us how that works. And we're also going to have the clerk of Union County on. So I mean, it's going to be, this vote by mail system is going to be new to New Jersey. I mean, New Jersey has had vote by mail or no.
Yeah, I vote by mail. Yeah, Mercer County
for a while.
Great job.
But now we're assuming, and frankly, we're all hoping that the vast majority of people are going to vote by mail. They will have a live polling place, at least one in each municipality. But frankly, the hope is, unless there's some special reason why you have to do that, because if you go there, you have to practice social distancing, and it could take a long time. And anyone who does that also is going to will cast a provisional ballot.
Right.
So the way it is now, everyone who's already a registered Democrat or Republican is going to get mailed an absentee ballot, period. Whereas someone who's registered, who's unregistered or an independent is going to get an application for a mail ballot. They have to do that because they don't know which ballot to send you.
Exactly.
If you're not registered with a political party. So I imagine, you and I will probably get a ballot for the political party that we're affiliated with, whichever.
I wonder what party that is.
Yeah, since we served in the same administration, I can probably take a pretty good guess. Although I don't think I've ever correctly asked it. And the same with me. Now, it's and we're just going to see. I mean, voting by mail. I mean, sometimes counting those votes, things can get lost. So there's going to have to be some resources put into this new system. But I can absolutely see why trying to hold a primary on our usual primary day
and doing it all at a poll would not work.
Right. I'm trying to hold it less than 2 weeks from now. Would have been the old-fashioned way. Would have been disaster. I don't know if they'd have gotten the poll workers to man the polls.
No.
Because who would be rightfully concerned about their safety? So I absolutely see why the governor did this.
Absolutely.
And we can.
I was glad to see him do it.
We'll see what happens in November. I mean, there are some drawbacks.
Mm-hmm.
You have to the ballot in the mail by election day, which means you may not have quite as much time if you really wanted to think.
Right.
And only make up your mind at the last minute, which obviously you can do if you can make up your mind in the polling booth if you want.
Right.
You don't get that choice. Maybe that's not going to make so much of a difference in the primary, but in the general election, it could. So,
right.
I mean, there are certain things that I probably would want to at least. There may be a reason why there at least still has to be the opportunity to vote live. Mm-hmm. Also, there's some persons with disabilities for whom vote by
probably want to vote in person.
Not an option. But I would expect that most voting, even in November, is going to be in New Jersey, is going to be done by mail.
Well, we're going to be working on it, and I tell you, watching very carefully and helping the governor make the right decisions on this, because there is no election that I can think of any more critical in my lifetime, and I'll be 70, Lord willing, in 4 weeks, than this one. So,
this governor's been having to make a lot of decisions in a hurry.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot. So we have our final segment that we're going to wrap up and then bring on the rest of the guests just to say goodbye. But one of the things with the vote by mail, and I don't even know if our next guest even wants to touch on this, we were so excited, another one of my clients, so excited when the governor signed into law that people who are on parole and probation could vote. And that was something like 80,000 people. We were so excited in New Jersey that they would be able to vote this year. Well, I don't know how that's going to work with vote by mail. Nobody's really talking about it. So, Reverend Boyer, that's not what you came on here today to talk about. But I thought I'd throw it out there because you were one of the main persons to testify before both houses on that bill that is now law. How are you, Pastor?
I'm well.
Good.
It's a blessing to be here, and it was a great privilege to be part of that fight to restore voting rights to 83,000 folks.
People thought it would never happen in the state of New Jersey.
Thought it would never happen.
Overwhelmingly approved by both houses.
Yes. So that was great, and a big hats off, a big congrats and gratitude to be in partnership with the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice.
Oh my goodness, he's relentless.
Yeah, my good friend Ryan Haygood leading that charge.
He's relentless. I would put him in my canoe with one oar anytime. He'll figure out how to get us there. Anytime.
For sure.
So tell us what's on your mind now. Heavy heart. What's going on in COVID-19 world besides the numbers that we hear about?
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity to discuss. Currently, the major piece that Salvation and Social Justice and many advocates are working on in the criminal justice space is the issue around how COVID-19 is affecting the prison population. And to be very specific, New Jersey has lost 43 folks who are incarcerated, who were formerly incarcerated to the coronavirus, have lost 2 corrections officers and have lost a nurse. So 46.
Now, I read yesterday, Pastor, that one of the gentlemen who passed away only had a 1-year sentence for shoplifting.
Exactly.
And he's gone.
Exactly. He had a 1-year charge, was just sent into prison in January for shoplifting. He has a history of small petty crimes, which basically were to in response to his habit. He had a drug use issue. And so what we decided as a state was that it made more sense to incarcerate him than at any point to really put decent interventions in place to deal with his health issue. And so really the punitive nature of a lot of what we've done in New Jersey was we enacted a death sentence to someone who by the furlough executive order should have been released. But the slowness in which that furlough has been enacted, which was signed by the governor on Good Friday on April the 10th.
I remember.
Yeah, and which we fought for, and we applauded. We thought
That's
it was
1,000 people, right? 1,000 inmates.
right. It should have. It was projected to release up to 1,000.
How many have been released?
There's different estimates. Our count is somewhere more around 120, but there have been other counts that are upwards of 300. Either way, it still is nowhere near the 1,000. There's a lot of bureaucratic obstacles and red tape that was put into the executive order to make it extraordinarily difficult to get people out. And that kind of inaction and bureaucracy has really led to the loss of life. Mm-hmm. To be clear, again, we applauded the furlough executive order as a great first step, but that's all it should have ever meant to be, was a first step. Mm-hmm. It was a first step, which was in many ways the safest political way of doing a release, which was far less robust than many other states have done. And it was a furlough, which is not a release. It is a temporary release in which, and it was only for 30 days, which have been surpassed at this point.
Low crime individuals.
Exactly. Right. Very, all nonviolent. And just to be very clear, the prison population is upwards of 18,000. And so in order to achieve social distancing and health to protect the 18,000, even if they did the 1,000-person release with swift efficiency, it would be a drop in the bucket. And so to never come back with a second step, to be more robust, to do a release that would take care of folks who are literally dying in prison from other ailments, folks who are over 65 years old who are in prison.
The birth dates,
Exactly. I mean, and the data overwhelmingly shows that even the most violent offenders do not recidivate. I think most of us, there's very few of us, there may be a few, but I don't think any of us really see that many elderly thugs on our street corners committing violent crimes because we age out of crime. And so we, I'm kind of disappointed to say that some of the pushback of our critique, some of the pushback has almost been to minimize the 40 some odd folks that have died, and to try and compare that number to the vastness of the 11,000 that we have lost in the state. And first and foremost, that really goes to exactly why our campaign is what it is, which is say their names. Say their names, because at the governor's daily press briefings, he has lifted up a name of somebody who absolutely ought to be lifted up. But not one of the folks who have died in prison, most of which, to the bureaucracy, the inaction, and the slowness in which the state, the lack of urgency that the state has done these releases, most of those deaths could have been avoided. And to be clear, we not only memorialize the 42, but this is a fight to protect the other 18,000.
Yeah.
So I think it's critically important, and we are mobilizing an action tomorrow. You have mentioned at the top of the show.
Yes.
I appreciate this. We are having a funeral procession around the Trenton War Memorial. We're meeting up at 11 o'clock, and we are having a funeral procession to commemorate those that we have lost. Obviously, in this environment, it is not an easy environment to mourn your dead. And unlike the administration, we have been approached by the people who have lost their loved ones, who were incarcerated. Folks who were, one young man was due to be home a week before he died.
Wow.
And should have been caught up even in the executive order. And so as part of what we see as not only advocacy, but also ministry,
Right.
a way to commemorate their loss and make sure that somebody lifts up their names and values their family members that have been lost in the state's prisons. But we also have a call to action to try to move forward some more robust measures that would protect the lives of the 18,000. And concretely, very quickly, we will be working with lawmakers who see the importance of the 42 lives that are lost and the 18,000 to be protected on legislation that would give a credit to the sentences, would ultimately take on the high end a year off the sentences for folks who are due to get out anyway. So folks who would max out a year from the beginning of the crisis would be eligible for release.
And now that's a bill already, right? You already have that sponsored in.
Yep, it will be. We're hopeful that this bill will be introduced tomorrow, and that bill would release upwards of 4,000 people. And it would create a step down process so that those who are currently in the halfway houses, who already come and go every day in and out of the halfway houses, would then be eligible for release, and then would step down folks who are inside, and would create much more of an opportunity to do the social distancing, the physical distancing necessary to protect the lives of the folks who are left inside.
Beautiful. Thank you very, very much. And at the end of this show, we are going to say their names. So if anyone watching the show has a loved one or knows of a neighbor or something, has a loved one who has passed away while in prison, we're going to say their names, have them sign on, and they will hear Pastor Boyer say their names. Now we're going, thank you so much, Pastor. We're going to go to our two folks, Jiles and Rhonda. If you could bring them on. And the truth of the matter is I'm going to set the table for you, and then I'm going to move on in the background because I want the two of you, first of all, give us your background, because you are cops in a way. I mean, FBI, law enforcement here in New Jersey. These are your brothers and sisters, right, Jiles?
Yes. As you know, Jeannine, for the viewing audience, I've served 25 years in local and state law enforcement. Everything from an instructor at the police academy to a director at the law enforcement agency. And most of my time I've spent in the patrol division in various different capacities. I also served as the national president of a national law enforcement organization, better known as NOVA, National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. So I had the opportunity to not only work with different colleagues from around the nation, but also to learn from them and to share experiences with them, and they shared experiences with me. So on the front line, I've dealt with a multitude of incidents, everything from a shoplifter right up to a homicide. So that's, the wealth of my experience that I would like to bring to this discussion.
The FBI. Tell me how you feel about what you're seeing this weekend.
So I'm first of all, thanks again for having me on. I'm at a little disadvantage. I missed everything that Jiles said, and so hopefully I can add to a little bit of what he did say. It hurt me, just like you said earlier, Jeannine, how much it really hurts you to see that video of Mr. Floyd life going out of his body, and it also hurt me. Now, regardless of whether I was federal are not the fact that I'm law enforcement, and I understand state, local, county, tribal, all different levels of law, and it's just quite troubling. And I'm sure it was quite troubling for other law enforcement officials to actually see that. It really goes back to courage. And I'm glad that Jiles is here, because he's the commissioner for training for the state and for the state of New Jersey. And it really does go back to courage to say something, courage to do something, courage to step up when something is not right, courage to hold back someone because you see them doing something they should not be doing as a law enforcement officer. So training is a pivotal piece in law enforcement, in anything that happens, because as a law enforcement officer, you are trained for your position, just like any other position. You are trained, and so various aspects of that position really needs to be on point. And so Jiles, as the commissioner, I'm hoping that there is some sort of discussion, particularly in the state of New Jersey, for incoming officers to really do a deep dive on their courage and what it takes to be a law enforcement officer. And there may need to be a refresher for the executives in law enforcement, the chiefs, the deputy chiefs, the assistant chiefs, the sergeants, the lieutenants, majors, all those at different ranks in law enforcement. They really have to take a hard look at their courage to step up, to say something, because that was a nudge.
Yes.
There are nudges that we see in law enforcement. We see nudges in people that we work with that say something's not right about that officer. Something's not right. We need to take a look at what's going on, because it's just no officer, I can't believe, experiences challenges that severe early on in their career. I mean, when I think about seeing that video and seeing that officer having his knee on Mr. Floyd's throat and the other officers that were nearby, it's you know, I didn't hear audio. I haven't heard audio. So I don't know whether someone was saying, move your knee. Move your knee. We got this. We have this.
There were onlookers saying it. We didn't hear any of the officers saying it, but the people around were begging him to move his knee.
Right. And so it's about the other officers that were around. You know, I'm curious. I'm curious. What were you thinking? What was that officer thinking? You know, I'm curious about the training that they receive as officers. I'm curious about the training in that department. Those are just some of the questions that I have, and what that looks like. Because there are signs. You know, I've served in different roles in the Bureau, starting as a street agent and working my way up into executive management. So I know what some of the signs are, the nudges that you experience when an officer or another agent is having challenges in what they're doing in their job. Because it could be a liability for that department, for that agency. And so that's why it's incredibly important that courage is demonstrated.
Let me ask you, and thank you for that. And that C word is something that I'm going to carry with me, as I told you earlier today, because it does take courage for one person to stand up. And I know, Jiles, you were involved in Ferguson. What are some of the things? What do you think some of the things that should be being done now, a couple days after?
Let me just also to add on to what Rhonda said. I'm saddened. My heart is broken, and my condolence goes out to the Floyd family. I have also served as an instructor at the police academy in unarmed defensive tactics. I've also served as an instructor in patrol operations and as a PT instructor. And I can tell you, there is nothing in any of the training that we receive that tells you to take away your compassion, your dignity, or your empathy for human life. That should not have happened, and I applaud the chief and the mayor for taking the swift action
quickly,
that they have taken. Because, you know, I love the profession. It's all the years that I served. It's an honorable profession. You get a livable wage to help people. And it's a helping profession. And so when we see something like this, and I know many of other law enforcement officers are out there day in and day out, running into the heat, and you know, are actually doing a good job. And it takes a couple of individuals like this to smear all of the good work that they've done while they're out there in the middle of the night putting their life on the line. This should not happen, and I'm glad they're taking the swift action that they're taking. But I was also encouraged today as I looked over the internet, and I've seen many other officers echoing similar sentiments about this. And it's people that I traditionally wouldn't have thought had done that, and I was glad to see that.
Well, I want to thank, I really want to thank the two of you coming on, because I know that my viewers had been inboxing me and saying, we just need someone to come into the cafe and say something. And sometimes it's misread, especially when the person who was murdered is African American, and when the law enforcement people are speaking up are African American. People think that maybe we're turncoat. But you know, in life, when we see something that's wrong, wrong is wrong. And this just appears so blatant. So thank you, Rhonda, and thank you so much, Jiles, for coming forward and talking to our viewers here today.
And Jeannine, too, if I could just say to that end, I've had a conversation with your friend regarding training in general. And I'm just going to take this opportunity, too, to share with the viewers that we are going now to be looking at all of the instruction that's given to law enforcement officers.
Good. And
reviewing that. And some things that may be draconian. I mean, the Police Training Commission was structured in 1961 by the New Jersey Senate. And some of the laws on the books or some of the practices may not be relevant for today's policing. So we are going to look at that. And again, the Attorney General made that possible. He's a person that's he's the chief law enforcement of the state and is over police training in New Jersey. And some may say, well, it didn't happen here. But you know what? Let's address the issue before it does happen.
And if it happens anywhere, it happened here.
Absolutely.
It happened here. Thank you again for coming on. We're going to conclude our show with saying the names of all of the folks in our correction system who have died from COVID-19. We want people to hear those names. Before we say those names, first of all, I want to give a plug for our show tomorrow. Most of you hear me talk about him all the time. I call him the mayor's mayor, Mayor Raz Baraka. I also call him, when I see him, I call him my sonny boy. And his mom knows that she and I share him because he is my sonny boy. I just love this guy. So he's coming on the LaRuelist Café tomorrow at 3 o'clock. And I know it's going to be a lively conversation there. And I've already put it out twice. So if he hears it, or if his wife Linda hears it, I want a poem tomorrow. You know, we're going to end with a poem, and I'm going to have song when he comes on. So get ready for this. So that's the one thing. And the other thing, I just want to thank each of my guests again. Elise, thank you so very much for coming on and being a part of this program today. You and I are going to be connected at the hip on some projects, and I'm going to bring you in on a couple things where I really want you to have an hour, because there are some things that I need to hear from you. I've done a lot of research on your background, and I tell you, you are one awesome, awesome intellectual. Thank you for coming on LaRuelist Café.
Thank you. I look forward to that.
My longtime friend, Chen, Dean, public advocate, all the things that you are. Thank you for sharing this moment. I know you ran in from a virtual commencement event, and I was so glad when you said yes. You know, even though you had a conflict that day, you said, I'll be there. And you were here, you showed up and showed out.
Jeannine,
Thank you very much.
I'll always be there. I look forward to future interactions I know we'll have.
Oh, we will have it, and you're the best. Thank you so very much. Also, to Rhonda and Jiles, again, thank you for coming in. See, that's not Jiles, that's the Reb, but there's Jiles. And thank you for coming in again. I'm sure, Rhonda, 3 is a charm. I know you're going to be back for a 3rd. And Jiles, now that I've reconnected with you, you will definitely be back. And I'm hoping my police director is coming on the end of the week. So we'll see. I love her. And we'll talk about that offline. But I just absolutely love Sheila Coley. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Reverend.
All
there
right.
you are. Say my name.
All right.
Tomorrow's a big day.
Yep.
Appreciate
tomorrow
coming in here.
Yeah, people are coming to Trenton. We asked folks if you would like to join us, you can register at sandsj.org. That's S as in Sam, AND, SJ as in socialjustice.org, or you can just Google Salvation and Social Justice, and the registration is right on our homepage.
And I'm all registered. LaRuelist Café is supporting this.
Thank you so much. I just, again, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity and a sacred moment to lift up these names.
And the good news about this, Pastor, is once this show is over, people continue to play and replay. So it's going to just get passed all around over the next 2 to 3 weeks. So that's a great thing.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. All right. For the names, you have the names in front of you?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Ricky James, Tony Cope, Peter Shanley, Shart Shavalapuran, Frank Silvera, Michael Wilson, Abdul Aziz Farrakhan, William Prell, James Trotman, Carmelo Herrera, Timothy Mormon, Quahar Sabir, Vito Nigro, Calvert Buchanan, Elias Chalet, Thomas DeGroat, William Conway, Roberto Rivera, Robert Livingston, Nnamdi Azikiwe, David Brown, Darrell Parks, Morgan Youngblood, Candido Caceres, Michael Bright, Calvert McKenzie, Tiffany Mofield, Denise Nagrotsky, Anthony Brown, Rory Price, Robert Brown, Kevin Ellington, Vincent Kerwetsky, Charles Ullery, Larry Yellock, Andrew Dixon, Jose Roman, Ricardo Williamson, Artis Cato, Bernard Waddell, Nelson Perdomo, Maria Gibbs, Susan Kalakio, Peter Simunyevich, Richard DeBow, and Sheldon Kyle.
May they all, Pastor, rest in peace.
Rest in peace. Thank you.
Good night, folks.